City leaders sold the public an illusion of safety, but a deep dive into these explosive reports reveals the true and significantly higher cost of manipulated crime data.
Right.
This wasn't incompetence. These documents, they really expose an intentional cover-up.
That's the core finding, absolutely. We've been handed this stack of documents, detailed reports in the House Oversight Committee, a draft from a Department of Justice investigation, and they all reveal something systemic.
Systemic.
We are talking about the alleged manipulation of fundamental crime statistics. And this is within the Metropolitan Police Department, the MPD, in Washington, D.C.
Okay, so let's unpack this for a minute. Our mission today is to cut through all the spin. We need to identify the specific tactics MPD leadership allegedly used to pressure, line officers into falsifying reports.
Yeah.
That's what deliberately created this inaccurate public record.
Right. And then what happened next?
Exactly. We also have to analyze the success of the recent federal intervention that exposed this whole issue, and I think most importantly, explain why this local manipulation creates what they call dirty data.
And that dirty data corrupts the entire justice system, not just in D.C., but potentially nationwide. The central narrative in all these sources is, well, it's shocking.
It is.
The priority of the MPD's top leadership, it seems, was not public safety. It was about delivering a specific, politically palatable narrative to the public and, to the mayor's office.
Okay, let's start right there. Section 1. The illusion of safety in D.C.
Yes.
The goal, particularly under Chief Pamela Smith, was, well, it was clear, hiding crime from the public eye. Commanders testified that Chief Smith prioritized suppressing the public reporting of crime over actually stopping crime on the streets.
And they had a very specific target for that. They weren't trying to change every single internal statistic. They were laser focused on manipulating the daily crime report, the DCR.
And the DCR is what everyone sees, right?
It's the crucial public-facing data set, yes. It only includes 9 categories of felony offenses. So the logic is if you can just move a crime out of one of those 9 boxes,
then poof, it disappears from the public record.
Exactly. The public record suddenly looks much, much cleaner.
That immediately creates this institutional incentive for dishonesty. And the sources, they paint a terrifying picture of the internal climate.
Terrifying is the right word.
Commanders described the mandatory crime briefings with Chief Smith as an atonement for our sins. That's almost religious language for a professional failure.
It speaks to the level of psychological pressure they were under. One commander actually testified that after being relentlessly berated for rising crime numbers in his district, he felt like a suspect himself.
Like he was the one who did something wrong.
As if he were personally responsible for the city's criminal activity. The sources repeatedly used terms like an ecosystem of fear, retaliation, and toxicity.
Let's think about that for a second. We're talking about highly trained police commanders, right? People who dedicate their lives to law enforcement.
Right.
And they're operating under such intense political pressure that they feel their only way out is to deliver low numbers by any means necessary, even if it means compromising their own integrity.
And that means necessary. It wasn't subtle. It was a specific manipulation tactic that the documents called the downgrade.
The downgrade.
Officers were allegedly instructed point blank to downgrade serious, publicly reported felony crimes to lesser offenses.
Yeah.
Intermediate offenses that don't appear in the public DCR.
So tell us what that looks like in practice. How do you take a serious felony that the public absolutely needs to know about and just hide it?
Well, the sources give us some really concrete examples. Say a crime was clearly a burglary. That's a major publicly reported felony.
Okay.
Officers were reportedly told to reclassify it as unlawful entry and theft.
So the person's house was still broken into, their stuff was still stolen.
The underlying event didn't change one bit, but the public classification did. That new classification doesn't hit the DCR, and suddenly the city's burglary rate looks like it's going down. It's artificially suppressed.
And what about violent crime? Burglary is bad, but assault with a dangerous weapon?
Yeah.
That's far more terrifying for residents.
Exactly. And that was another one. Assault with a dangerous weapon, or ADW, is a serious, publicly reported felony that was allegedly downgraded to endangerment with a firearm. Now, that is a monumental shift.
Yeah.
You're taking a charge that implies someone was actively trying to hurt someone.
Right, an assault.
And you're shifting it to a lower charge that the public simply won't see in their official daily reports. And this led directly to statistics that were, and I'm quoting here, lightly unreliable and inaccurate. Commanders felt it was a deliberate effort to keep the true crime rates hidden.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because this manipulation, it was only truly exposed when the federal government stepped in.
Yes.
When President Trump declared a crime emergency and deployed federal resources, the U.S. Attorney for D.C., Jeanine Pirro, launched a massive review.
And that review was extensive. I mean, they looked at almost 6,000 police reports. They interviewed over 50 witnesses.
And the findings.
The findings confirmed what the commanders had been whispering all along. A significant number of reports had been misclassified.
So what was the crucial takeaway from Pirro's perspective, according to the documents?
The crucial takeaway is this. Because the MPD leadership had been artificially suppressing the crime rates, the true crime rates, once the federal review accurately calculated them, were actually higher than what the local D.C. government had been reporting.
Wow.
And this revealed two things at once.
Okay, which are?
First, that the community was in much greater danger than they were being told. And second, Pirro concluded that uncovering these manipulated statistics made it clear that the federal crime-fighting efforts, led by President Trump, delivered even more safety than originally claimed.
So the argument is the intervention wasn't just necessary to fight crime.
It was necessary to expose the corruption that was hiding how bad the situation really was. The true results of that federal surge were being masked by the local leadership's manipulation.
And the success of that surge, it's not just a political talking point in these reports. It's confirmed by the very commanders who are being pressured to lie.
It is. They describe the federal law enforcement partners as a vital force multiplier.
A force multiplier.
They did. That surge provided desperately needed personnel. It helped them reduce property crime numbers and, surprisingly, even allowed these incredibly stressed commanders to finally get some downtime.
So they confirmed that the external intervention was actually working on the streets.
Even while their own internal metrics were being fudged for political reasons, yes.
So local leadership was manipulating data to present the illusion of a safe city, while the federal intervention was necessary to achieve actual safety. Okay, but let's shift focus now to Section 2. Because the consequences of this intentional deception, they reach far beyond public relations or officer morale. They fundamentally contaminate the entire judicial system.
You're absolutely right. The foundation of our entire justice system is that initial police report.
Everything starts there.
Everything. The MPD's own training defines it as the agency's official record of an event. Every single successful criminal prosecution relies on its accuracy.
And how significant is that really? When you change the classification of a crime, does that tank the prosecutor's ability to move forward?
Oh, it creates chaos.
Yeah.
When commanders alter those classifications, changing a felony to a lower non-public charge, they contaminate the legal record that gets presented to prosecutors and courts right from the very start. That initial police report is now fundamentally based on a lie.
That's the definition of poisoning the well.
It is.
If that source document is inaccurate, then everything that follows, the arraignment, plea bargaining, sentencing, it's all built on this shaky, corrupted foundation.
Precisely. Inaccurate reports compromise case viability immediately. They lead to what the documents call unnecessary litigation, as defense attorneys can easily challenge the foundational facts.
Of course.
And crucially, they obscure the true nature of what actually happened. This can result in failed prosecutions, dangerous offenders being released too early. Any number of unjust outcomes because the court never understood the gravity of the original crime.
This reminds me of a ship trying to sail without a true map.
That's the perfect analogy for the system as a whole. Think of manipulating police data like placing a powerful magnet right next to a ship's compass.
Okay.
The system, the entire justice apparatus, it keeps moving forward, but it's navigating based on fundamentally false readings. And that ensures all future voyages, all those strategic policing plans that rely on those contaminated charts, they're fatally flawed.
You're spending resources in the wrong places.
And you're blind to where the real danger is.
Now, the sources point out that this practice, it's not new to D.C. The professional term for this manipulation of statistics is juking the stats.
Juking the stats. Yeah, that's a term that gained prominence historically in major cities like New York and Baltimore. It's often tied to these data-driven performance systems, like CompStat.
CompStat was supposed to use data to hold commanders accountable for reducing crime, right?
That was the goal, to measure success.
So how did a system designed to measure success end up creating an incentive for deception?
It all comes down to pressure. When performance metrics become rigid, and they're tied to your promotion, to your job security, commanders often find it easier to manipulate the metrics than to solve the deep, complex problem of crime.
Right, the path of least resistance.
And historically, this has meant pressuring officers to shift arrest patterns, change classifications, or even convince victims not to file complaints, all just to artificially reduce those high-profile felony numbers.
That history lesson is so important because it tells us that DC's behavior is part of a known dangerous pattern, and that juked information leads directly to the creation of what we call dirty data.
Correct. Dirty data is information that's derived from corrupt, biased, or intentionally manipulated practices. And while it was bad enough when that data stayed local, the real modern threat comes when we feed that information into national technology systems.
Which brings us to Section 3, the threat of algorithmic bias nationwide.
Exactly.
This is where a local lie can become a national catastrophe. If police departments across the country are using this kind of dirty data, what happens when it's fed into powerful software that's used to predict future crime?
This is the insidious modern consequence, predictive policing. These systems, they're used in cities all across the U.S., and they forecast future crime by analyzing massive amounts of historical data.
So if that historical data is built on DC's juked stats,
or Baltimore's biased enforcement patterns, then the software immediately creates a dangerous confirmation feedback loop.
wait, a feedback loop. So you're telling me this corrupted data is essentially feeding on itself. It learns the bias and then reinforces it.
That's the bias in, bias out problem in algorithmic design. The system ingests the dirty data, the manipulated arrests, the false classifications. It assumes their objective truth, and then it directs police resources right back to the exact same neighborhoods where they were biasedly generating the dirty data in the first place.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It is. It's a loop that just reinforces old discrimination and corruption.
And in effect, the technology provides this high-tech veneer of objectivity to practices that were discriminatory or flawed from the very beginning. Let's dive into the case studies the sources provide. First up, New Orleans.
New Orleans is a perfect demonstration. The city used the Palantir Gotham system. It's a very powerful predictive platform.
Okay.
But the system was trained on New Orleans Police Department data that was collected during a period when the NOPD was operating under a Department of Justice consent decree.
And that was specifically for discriminatory policing practices.
Exactly. So the input data was already known to be biased against certain populations. The system ingested the historically biased, potentially dirty data from electronic reports, from gang databases, and then it tried to identify potential victims and perpetrators of violent crimes.
And the outcome? I'm guessing it just validated the existing bias, not objective reality.
Precisely. The system's output identified the population of victims and perpetrators as overwhelmingly young African-American male,
Wow.
which mirrored the exact population NOPD was known to disproportionately target through its documented bias practices. The software didn't discover a new truth. It just gave a technical, seemingly objective stamp of approval to the department's existing flawed history.
Now let's look at Chicago. They used a system called the Strategic Subject List, or SSL. This case study, it illustrates how the type of data you choose can contaminate the results.
Right. Chicago's SSL system ingested dirty data that was heavily reliant on raw arrest records. And this is critical. They used arrests, which reflect police actions and discretion, not convictions, which reflect proven guilt.
So it's based on who the police stop, not who is actually found guilty of a crime.
Exactly. And that reliance on arrests directly reflected the department's documented history of unlawful stops and racial profiling, rather than actual future criminal risk.
And what was the terrifying output in Chicago?
The independent analysis found that a staggering 56% of black men under age 30 in Chicago had a risk score on the SSL.
56%. Half.
The system was essentially flagging half the young male population of a specific demographic based on data that was itself a product of historical bias. And get this, despite this massive flagging, the system failed entirely to reduce gun violence. It just flagged the population the police were already targeting.
Which just proves the data was tainted from the start. What's truly terrifying about these systems isn't just the immediate bias, though. It's the permanence.
Yes.
Once this dirty data, whether it's from DC's downgrades or New Orleans or Chicago's arrest records, once it's fed into these complex machines, can you clean it out? Can you just flip a switch?
The sources suggest that the damage is often irreversible. These systems are massive, they're complex, they're opaque. Once that dirty data is ingested and the algorithms are trained on it, it becomes extremely difficult, if not impossible, to isolate and remove it.
So the legacy lives on.
It means the legacy of politically motivated, manipulated local police practices in one city continues to shape policing strategies across the country long into the future. It contaminates the data pipeline for years to come.
That's a powerful conclusion. Okay, let's summarize the key takeaways from this deep dive into the MPD documents. The investigation confirms that political priorities within the MPD leadership directly led them to mislead the public about serious violent crime.
Which severely compromised judicial integrity and, just as importantly, completely destroyed officer morale.
And critically, this whole manipulation revealed a necessary truth. That when accurate data is finally forced into the open, the resulting true crime numbers, they validated the need for aggressive external intervention.
Like the recent federal surge, to actually restore public safety. The attempt to downplay the crime was a profound disservice to the community, and it obscured the true successive efforts that were actually addressing the problem.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought for you to consider. The foundation of justice rests on accurate facts documented in the basic police report. The Metropolitan Police Department's own training explicitly requires officers to write reports based on honor and integrity. It's even on their badge.
Right.
So, given the systemic pressures and this culture of fear that was exposed here, what level of systemic accountability is truly necessary to ensure that local political pressure never again forces officers to choose between keeping their jobs and telling the truth?